Wide shot of a dry, cracked farm field at dawn. Wind blows dust across empty rows. A weathered, for sale, sign leans in the dirt near the fence. Some mistakes ruin a life. This one saved it. This is the story of a man named Daniel Cole, a struggling farmer who was 3 weeks away from losing everything his family had built over 3 generations, and how a single moment of carelessness, the kind that should have ended in disaster, instead grew into the most extraordinary harvest his small farming town had ever seen. If you've ever felt like you were one mistake away from losing it all, stay with me. Because sometimes, the universe has a strange sense of humor. Daniel Cole was 44 years old, and for the first time in his life, he was afraid to open his mailbox. The Cole family had farmed the same 120 acres in the fictional town of Millbrook Hollow for over 60 years. Daniel's grandfather cleared the land by hand. His father expanded it, built the barn, dug the irrigation ditches. And Daniel had inherited it at 26, full of pride and plans. But the last 4 years had broken him. A drought had wiped out 2 harvests in a row. Then came a hailstorm that flattened an entire field of corn 2 weeks before it was ready to cut. Then rising fuel and fertilizer prices ate what little profit remained. Daniel had taken out loan after loan just to keep the tractors running and the lights on. Notice of default. If payment is not received within 30 days, foreclosure proceedings will begin. 30 days. That's all the time he had left. Daniel's wife, Sarah, enters the kitchen holding their 8-year-old daughter Emily's hand. Sarah looks at the letter on the table, then at Daniel's face. Is that the bank again? Folding the letter, forcing calm, it's nothing we can't handle. It was, of course, exactly the thing he could not handle. But a father doesn't say that out loud. Not in front of his little girl, who was busy drawing a picture of the farm. Cows, a red barn, and a rainbow over the cornfields, the way she imagined it should always look. Close-up of Emily's crayon drawing, bright and hopeful, in contrast to the grim kitchen. Daniel looked at that drawing for a long moment. Then he grabbed his boots and walked out to the barn, because there was nothing left to do but keep working, even when the numbers no longer made sense. A dusty, cluttered shed at the edge of the property, filled with old farm equipment, rusted tools, and stacked burlap sacks. Daniel had come to the shed that afternoon looking for spare irrigation fittings. Instead, he found something else. A row of unlabeled burlap sacks his father had left behind, filled with old seed corn and soybean stock that Walter had been experimenting with in his final years before he passed. What did you leave me, old man? Walter Cole had always been a tinkerer. Long before seed science was something you read about online, he'd cross-pollinate different corn varieties in a back plot just to see what would happen. Most of his experiments failed. A few produced strange, twisted, inedible ears that the family joked about for years. But Walter had never labeled which sack was which. And Daniel, exhausted, frustrated, and running out of both money and patience, made a decision that would change everything. He needed to plant his final field, his last real chance at a harvest before the bank came calling. His usual seed supplier had raised prices again, and Daniel couldn't afford a full order. So, out of desperation more than hope, he grabbed several of his father's old burlap sacks instead, mixed them together without checking, and loaded them into the seed drill. It was late. I was tired. I told myself it didn't matter. Seed is seed. I was wrong. But I didn't know that yet. Daniel driving the tractor at dusk, planting the mixed seed across the last open field, the sun setting behind him. But Daniel didn't have the luxury of doing things the right way anymore. He only had the luxury of doing something, anything, and hoping. Time-lapse style montage. Rain falling on the field, Daniel checking irrigation lines, Emily running between rows, Sarah hanging laundry, the calendar on the kitchen wall flipping pages. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of Daniel's life. The bank sent a second letter, then a third. A representative named Mr. Grady called twice, his voice polite but firm, reminding Daniel exactly how many days remained. "Mr. Cole, I understand farming is unpredictable, but the bank has obligations too. I need to see something, anything, that shows this loan can be serviced. I've got a harvest coming in. Give me until October." Mr. Grady agreed, reluctantly, to one final extension. October 1st. If Daniel couldn't show real progress by then, the farm would be sold at auction. That gave Daniel exactly 9 weeks. 9 weeks for a field of seed he hadn't planned, hadn't planted on purpose, and honestly didn't expect much from. But something strange started happening almost immediately. The seedlings came up faster than anything else on the farm. Whereas properly ordered corn in the north field was still low and thin, the mystery field along the south fence line was already knee-high within 3 weeks. The stalks were thicker. The leaves were a deeper, almost unnatural green. At first, I thought it was a fluke. Maybe just good rain, good sun. I didn't want to get my hopes up. Hope, at that point, felt dangerous. Daniel's neighbor, an older farmer named Russ Kimball, leans over the fence line, staring at the field with raised eyebrows. "Danny, what in the world did you plant over here? I've been farming 40 years, and I ain't never seen corn come up like that." "Honestly, Russ? I don't fully know." Neither of them knew it yet, but that field was about to become the talk of the entire county. Close-up shots of the corn stalks, unusually tall, ears forming early, kernels beginning to swell. By week 5, the mystery field wasn't just growing fast, it was growing wrong, in the best possible way. The ears of corn were forming 2 to 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Each stalk was producing not one, but often 2 full ears, something almost unheard of in standard corn varieties. Daniel began keeping notes, almost obsessively, in a small notebook he kept in his truck. Week 5. Stalk height nearly 7 feet. Double-eared on roughly 60% of plants. Kernel rows unusually dense. Something is different about this seed. I need to find out what. Small Agricultural Extension Office. A young agronomist named Dr. Patricia Ruiz examines a sample ear of corn Daniel brought in, turning it over in her hands. "Mr. Cole, where exactly did you source this seed?" "It was my father's. Old experimental stock. Cross-pollinated different corn lines years ago. I honestly planted it by accident, grabbed the wrong sacks in a rush." "Well, by accident or not, your father may have stumbled onto something special. This hybridization shows traits of both drought resistance and accelerated growth. If this holds up through harvest, this isn't just a good crop, Mr. Cole. This could be a genuinely rare hybrid line." Dr. Ruiz asked permission to study the field further, and Daniel, still cautious but increasingly hopeful, agreed. In a town like Millbrook Hollow, news traveled faster than weather warnings. Within 2 weeks, everyone from the feed store owner to the pastor at the local church had heard about the Cole Miracle Field. "I'm telling you, I've never seen corn come in like that. Danny's out there getting double ears on nearly every stalk. Bet the bank's gonna wish they hadn't sent him all them letters." Daniel, meanwhile, tried to stay grounded. He'd seen hope turn to heartbreak before. The hailstorm 2 years earlier had taught him that a good-looking field could be destroyed overnight. So even as the corn kept growing tall and strong, he refused to celebrate. Not yet. Daniel and Sarah standing at the edge of the field at sunset, the corn towering above head height. "Daniel, look at it. It's incredible." "It's not harvested yet. I'm not letting myself believe it until it's in the silo." You're allowed to hope a little. You've earned that much. But hope, for Daniel, had become something fragile, something he handled carefully, the way you'd hold a glass that had already cracked once before. Dark storm clouds roll in over the farm. Wind picks up violently. Daniel runs outside, staring anxiously at the sky above his precious field. Then, in the 7th week, disaster nearly struck again. A severe thunderstorm system moved through the region, the kind of storm that had destroyed Daniel's corn 2 years prior. Weather alerts warned of high winds and possible hail. Daniel stood in his yard that evening, watching the horizon darken, his stomach in knots. I remember standing there thinking, this is it. This is how it ends. Just like before. Rain and wind battering the farmhouse. Daniel and Sarah watched from the window as lightning flashes over the fields. Daniel walking through the field the next morning. Some stalks are bent, a few broken at the edges, but the vast majority stand tall, undamaged. What he found nearly brought him to his knees, not in despair, but in disbelief. While neighboring fields had taken real damage, his father's strange hybrid corn had barely bent. Dr. Ruiz would later explain that the thicker stalk structure and deeper root system, likely a product of the drought-resistant traits, had also made the plants far more resistant to wind damage. Mr. Cole, in 12 years of agricultural work, I don't think I've seen a hybrid line perform like this. Whatever your father was doing back there, he may have created something worth documenting, maybe even worth patenting. For the first time in months, Daniel allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. Early morning. Combine harvesters lined up at the edge of the field. Daniel checks the machinery one final time. Neighbors, including Russ, have shown up to help. By week 9, just days before the bank's final deadline, the mystery field was ready for harvest. Word had spread so widely that half the county seemed to show up that morning, some out of genuine neighborly support, others simply curious to see the field everyone had been talking about for 2 months. All right, Danny. Let's bring this thing in. As the combines moved through the rows, the yield numbers coming off the field were staggering. Where Daniel's other fields were producing what he considered a decent, average harvest, the mystery field was producing nearly double the yield per acre, some rows even more than that. Grain trucks filling rapidly. Daniel watches the yield monitor in the cab of the combine, eyes wide. I kept looking at the yield monitor thinking it had to be broken. It wasn't broken. It was real. By the end of the day, the field that Daniel had planted almost as an act of desperation, grabbing unlabeled sacks in the dark because he couldn't afford proper seed, had produced the single largest harvest of his farming career, on the smallest and least prepared field he owned. Daniel sitting alone in the grain truck as the sun sets, staring at the mountain of corn, and he thought about his father in that moment. About all those years Walter spent tinkering in that back plot, mocked gently by his own family for wasting time on experiments that never seemed to go anywhere. Turns out, Dad, you weren't wasting your time at all. You were just planting something for a day you'd never live to see. Daniel's truck pulls up outside the local bank branch. He steps out holding a folder of paperwork and grain sale receipts. 3 days before the deadline, Daniel walked into the bank to meet with Mr. Grady, the same representative who had called him twice threatening foreclosure. Bank office. Mr. Grady sits across from Daniel, reviewing the paperwork with visible surprise. Flipping through the grain receipts, Mr. Cole, this is significantly more than what we discussed. This alone covers your overdue balance, and there's enough here to bring the loan current for the next 2 quarters. Turns out my father left me something more valuable than I realized. Genuinely impressed. Well, whatever happened out there, I'd say it happened at exactly the right time. The foreclosure was canceled. The loan was restructured with breathing room Daniel hadn't had in years. For the first time since the drought began, the Cole family farm was no longer on the edge of disaster. Months later, Daniel, Dr. Ruiz, and a representative from a regional seed cooperative stand in the field, now freshly plowed for the next season. A regional agricultural cooperative approached Daniel about formally testing and potentially licensing the seed line, an arrangement that, if successful, could provide the Cole farm with an entirely new and stable source of income for years to come. Your father may not have known exactly what he created, Mr. Cole, but you're going to make sure it doesn't go to waste. Smiling for the first time in the whole story, no. This time, we're doing it on purpose. Daniel walking through the field with Emily, now planting seeds together by hand in the same back plot where Walter once experimented. Daniel began setting aside a small section of land, the very plot where his father used to experiment, to continue the work Walter had started decades earlier. This time, though, everything would be documented, labeled, studied, intentional. Daddy, is this the magic corn? Kneeling beside her, it's not magic, sweetheart. It's just what happens when you don't give up, even when things look hopeless. Your grandfather planted something a long time ago, not knowing it would help us someday. And now, we're going to keep planting, for you, and for whoever comes after you. Wide aerial shot of the Cole family farm now thriving. Green fields stretched to the horizon. The farmhouse in the distance, lights on, smoke rising from the chimney. Daniel Cole never set out to save his farm with a mistake. He simply ran out of options, made a rushed decision in a dark shed, and hoped for the best. But sometimes, the difference between ruin and rescue isn't a perfect plan. It's the willingness to keep going, even when every choice feels like a gamble. Sometimes, the thing that saves you was planted long before you even knew you'd need it. The Cole family farm still stands today in Millbrook Hollow, no longer on the edge of bankruptcy, but standing instead as a reminder, legacy isn't always something you inherit on purpose. Sometimes, it's something you stumble into, in a dusty shed, on a desperate night, with nothing left to lose. Final shot, Emily's crayon drawing from the beginning of the story, now framed and hanging on the farmhouse wall, the cows, the red barn, and the rainbow over the cornfields, no longer just a child's imagination, but real. The end.